Good day to you once again, and a blessed Holy Week. And I pray that the suffering of Christ shall not be in vain in the life of every one of us, in Jesus' name. I want to continue with where we stopped the last time, and that is liturgy in Christian worship. Just go along with me. Liturgy, as I said in the last video, is from the Greek word liturgia, meaning public service, formed by two words, people and work, which simply means the work of people publicly. And we looked at responsorial prayers in the Book of Common Prayers. We look at the seasons that you have, which is also in the Book of Common Prayers. And a very good example is the season that we have, which is a season of Lent. You know, as we said, that the celebration of feasts and holidays pertain to the event in the life of Jesus, the lives of the saints, and aspects of the Godhead. That's why we have, after now, we go into the Trinity season, which the color will also change. And I think it is the Trinity season that ends everything all. And we'll now start again from the birth of Christ. And all this we can see in the Book of Common Prayers. So liturgy is not just a matter of taste or churchmanship. Liturgy is central to Christianity and is an integral part of the Christian family relationship with God. The signs, symbols, and sacred actions which form public prayer and worship spring from the language and event of God's own self-revelation. Anglican's liturgical celebration arises directly out of the mystery of salvation in Jesus Christ and are part of the very means by which they enter into that mystery. We all know that Anglican came out from the Catholic. It was a breakout. I wouldn't want us to go into history, but it was a breakout because of you can't marry this, you can't marry that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that is what actually gave back to Anglicanism in Europe. And they actually now base their own liturgy on the mystery of salvation. So liturgy and early church fathers in Christian worship. Liturgy and early Christian church fathers in Christian worship. The theme of worship is taken up by many of the church fathers, including Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Hippolytus of Rome. The Holy Eucharist was the central act of worship in early Christianity. The Holy Eucharist is the communion service that we call it today. The Holy Eucharist was the central act of worship in early Christianity. We can all remember that when Jesus was going, he was the one he instituted the communion service, and that is the partaking of his body and blood on the same night that he was betrayed. And after his ascension, that has been the mode of public worship of early Christians. Anytime they are gathered together, they are gathered to actually eat from the Lord's table, partaking in his body and partaking in his blood. The liturgy of the synagogue and the ritual of the Jewish temple, both of which were participated in by early Christians, helped shape the form of the early Christian liturgy, which was a dual liturgy of the Word and of the Eucharist. This early structure of the liturgy still exists in the Catholic Mass and Orthodoxy liturgy. What we mean there is that, culturally, before Christianity came, the Jews have their own mode of worship, and which was the liturgy of the synagogue and the rituals of the Jewish temple. And it was Christianity that was battered from Judaism. And so some methods of worship in the old Judaism was actually imbibed into early Christian worship. It actually formed part and basis of early Christian liturgy. But what characterizes the liturgy of the early Christian worship, as we read here, is dual liturgy of the Word and of the Eucharist. So that means the preaching of the Word and the partaking of the Lord's table. And as you can see, it is still practiced by many of our Orthodox churches today. A very good example is the African church that came out from the Anglican church. The Anglican church that came out from the Catholic church. The early Christian use of incense in worship seemed first to originate in Christian funeral rites. The early Christian use of incense in worship seemed first to originate in Christian funeral rites and was later used during regular worship services. Incense was also used in the Bible to worship God and symbolizes prayer. In both the Old Testament and the New Testament, one of the three Magi offered Christ frankincense, and in the book of Revelation, angels and saints appear in heaven offering incenses to God, thus setting a precedent for Christian use of incense in worship. Let me drop it here. If you enter the African church today and you see us having our worship and we're actually burning incense, what will you think? Remember that the Anglican imbibed some worship from Catholic Mass and they rejected some. But if you notice to today, the Catholics still burn incense. And that is part of their worship. Well, I think after this video lecture, I will drop an assignment for us, and I want it to be submitted. I want it to be submitted. I will give a deadline to it too. But meanwhile, let us continue. Reformation liturgies. Reformation liturgies. Worship as singing underwent great changes for some Christians within the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther, a music lover, composed hymns that are still sung today and expected congregations to be active participants in the service, singing along. John Calvin in Geneva argued that while instrumental music had its time with the Levite of the Old Testament, it was no longer a proper expression for the church. This was expanded upon by John Knox. Only psalms were sung, and they were sung a cappella. Furthermore, in the Genevan and Scottish Reformed tradition, man-made hymns are not sung, being seen inferior to God-inspired psalms of the Bible. The Calvinist regulative principle of worship distinguishes traditional Presbyterian and Reformed churches from the Lutheran or other Protestant churches. The only constant thing in life is change. And if you are talking about the Reformation liturgies, we are talking about the transformation that liturgy has gone through from time immemorial till now, from where the early Christian church were actually having their public worship till today. It has gone through lots of reformations. People coming up with different ideas, people singing hymns, and not people preferring psalms over hymns, people preparing hymns that comes from the Bible itself, people not wanting to sing the praise and worship kind of praise and worship, that if you must sing, it must be from the hymn book. Even today, we still have this issue of prayers being read from the Book of Common Prayers and extempore prayers. We have the traditionalist that believes that the extempore prayer is baseless. They believe it's not divine. And where we have some that are evangelical in nature prefer extempore prayer more than the reading from the books of common prayer. They argue that the book for common prayer is not inspired, that extempore prayer is inspired. We have people with different views, and even till today, we still have them, just like we have them even in the early Christian church. And that has now led to many reformations of our liturgy that we'll briefly go through this morning. And we have the biblical evangelical liturgy. Biblical evangelical liturgy. Failing to appreciate the purpose of Cranmer's liturgical work, Jacob accepts the decline of its influence on modern Anglican liturgies. And the truth is this. The truth is that most of these reformations we have is actually based on human preferences. Human being preferring one way, one method over another. And because they know they have that influence of making that change, they actually want to make that change. And that is what is actually leads to reformations even till today. And that is why we have our constitutions being revised almost every time to grow along with changes in the society, development in the society. May God help us. Failing to appreciate the purpose of Cranmer's liturgical work, Jacob accepts the decline of its influence on modern Anglican. After all, for Anglo-Catholic liturgical scholarship, it's self-evident that following the ancient shape of Eucharistic action is best. Yet, the Reformation Anglicanism of Cranmer and Hooker actually points in a different direction entirely, that liturgies must constantly be contextualized to local contemporary culture to ensure an effective proclamation of the gospel. While the Catholic holds on to the old method of Eucharist worship, Anglicanism believes that no, that there must be a convention to actually present the gospel to them in a local way. Let it come to the culture. It has to be based and rooted in the culture so that it can have more impact and understanding. More impact and understanding. And meanwhile, my question now is this. If Anglicanism of Cranmer and Hooker were actually pointing to the fact that liturgies must constantly be constituted to local contemporary culture, now they brought religion, Christianity, to Africa, Nigeria in particular. Why is it now then that they now decided to, imprint their own method of worship onto us? Why didn't they allow us to actually grow? Let it be a cultural base. Let it be adapted to our culture. And that is one of the reasons the African church actually came into what? To existence. Worshipping Christ in our local way. If you notice today, the beating of drums, singing of praise and worship was actually introduced by the African church, which is now being copied by almost every other churches today. Before it was hymns. While many fleeing the aridness of biblical fundamentalism do seem to upright over Cranmer and unquestioningly embrace a liturgical fundamentalism rooted only a few centuries later, perhaps that is not the best missionary response for postmodern North America. As its heart, Anglo-Catholic liturgical scholarship emphasizes what we do in cooperation with God's assistance to become godly like Him. Indeed, liturgy is seen as the work of the people, yet in an era born out from a message of being saved by grace, but sustained by sweat, where those under 30 associate church with feelings, pressure to be good enough, maybe a biblical evangelical liturgy derived from Cranmer, one designed to emphasize what God has done, is doing, and will do for you and your community, is the more effective way forward. If the reformers are right, it only be because such a liturgy more closely reflects and more clearly impact the true nature of the gospel. What are we saying about these differences? Some believed that liturgy is indeed the work of the people. Even though man is saved by grace, but after being saved by grace, there is a need for you to maintain that grace by your sweat, by your work, by what you do, by your public service, by your public worship. While some group believe that it doesn't have to be the sweat of the people, it doesn't have to be the work that will sustain it, but we need to live a life that we emphasize what God has done, is doing, and will do for you and your community. And they believe that is a better way forward. And reformers are right. If the reformers are right, it's only because such a liturgy more closely reflects and more clearly imparts the true nature of what? Of the gospel. Liturgy in present day. Current Christian worship practice are diverse in modern Christianity, with a range of custom and theological views. And that's why we have many different denominations today. Even Orthodoxy. We have the Methodists, they have a different way of worship. We have the Africanism, we have the Anglicans, we have the Catholic, we have the Presbyterians. Even though similar in worship, Orthodoxy, but we still have some little differences by the reason of what we believe, and that's what we believe is what we uphold. With a range of custom and theological views, three broad groupings can be identified. And while some elements are universal, style and content varies greatly due to the history and different emphasis of the various branches of Christianity. In many Christian traditions, regular public worship is complemented by worship in private and small group, such as meditation, prayer, and study. Singing often forms an important part of Christian worship. And we have common elements. While different considerable in forms, the following items characterize the worship of virtually all Christian churches: meetings on Sunday, Bible readings, communion or the Eucharist, music, either choral or congregational, either with or without instrumental accompaniment. We have prayer, teaching in the form of sermon or homily, a collection or offering. These are common elements in all our churches, but we still have different views in theology and ideology. And in the next class, we'll take a look at sacramental traditions and Christian symbolism in Christian worship. We want to look at symbols. We want to look at symbols and what they understand. Those things that we imprint on our altar coverings, on our pulpit coverings, on our stool, the stool we wear, those symbols that we have, what do they actually represent? Do have a wonderful day. Goodbye.